Evening. So how many of you want to learn how to be creative, how to be innovative, how to think outside the box? All of us? Okay. So how many of you want to go in this direction, as you see on the left, on the right? Yeah? The rest of you, my job is to convince you to move into that direction. All right? How to deviate. All right? So, we live with a lot of ironies in life, a lot of paradoxes, right? When you are in college, you've been asked to fit in, to blend in, to be like everybody else, right? At the same time, you've been asked to stand out. Isn't it? So you got to fit in, then you have to stand out. You go for work. They will tell you got to play by the rules, play by the book. But they also tell you if you want to really climb the corporate ladder, you need to break some rules. Yeah? You cannot always play by the rule. You have to go the extra mile, you have to break some rules. If you are doing business, people will tell you, you have to play it safe. You got to play it safe, right? But at the same time, you've been told, you got to risk it. So we live with this kind of paradoxes every day. And in my studies on how people have become successful, on how companies have become successful, I have understood that most of the companies, individuals or professionals, they have deviated. They don't keep doing the same thing they have been doing all through their life. You can't expect a company to do the same thing, giving the same products and services, and to be in that growth forever. You don't see professionals having the same skill set forever to really grow up in the corporate ladder. So we see people deviating. And today I want to give you an idea about how to think differently. We always hear about think differently, think outside the box, but I just want to prepare your mind how you can do that. So to become a deviant, you can't follow the crowd. You got to deviate from the crowd. Okay. Now, who are these deviants? Now, the deviants are the people who are misfits. They are the mavericks. They are the outlaws. They are the guys who break the rules, change the game changers. They are the disruptors. They are the innovators. They are the very creative kind of people. Now, these are the people who move away from the mainstream and they move to a new stream or create a new stream of opportunity or create a new value for themselves and others. Now, we have a lot of examples to give about great innovators and great thinkers. Who comes to your mind if you have to think about a person who is very, very innovative, who was innovative? Steve Jobs. Now, you know that Steve Jobs is a great innovative person. He's also a great deviant in my study. So he has given us many innovations like iPod, iPad, iPhone, all these. But that is not his greatest innovation. His greatest innovation was Apple Store. Why? Because the whole world was embracing the idea of e-commerce at that time. Steve Jobs had this idea. We are not going to sell iPhone like any commodity online. We're going to go with the new trend. We're going to get to the retail. So everybody advised him not to do that. But then he did it. He said he didn't want the iPhone to be sold like any other commodity. He wanted iPhone to be sold like how people buy Gucci or a Prada or Armani, just like any other luxury goods. So he was deviating from the mainstream idea. Also at the time, a company like Gateway Computers was closing down most of their retail operation. He did the opposite of what the world was thinking at the same time. So he moved into the iStore, the Apple stores. And you know that if there was no Apple store, you cannot have that kind of a success story. If you don't know the medium at which you're going to promote your products, you wouldn't have a great story with your products. So the real enemy of creativity is thinking like a crowd. Today, you know what? We have outsourced our own thinking. When was the last time we had a question in our mind and we figured out the answer by ourselves? What happens when you have a question in your mind? What is the first thing you do? You go to Google, right? You outsource your own thinking. Is somebody else doing that for you, right? So we are following the crowd, and if you look at the information overload people talk about, it's not really information overload, it's opinion overload. It's too many opinions out there, and we are outsourcing the idea. So what happened to our own thinking, our own creativity? Because we want to be accepted, we want to be liked by everybody, so we've sacrificed our own viewpoints and opinions. When we want to voice it out, we don't voice it out. We just go with the crowd. And that is the real problem. Stagnation is the enemy of innovation. Status quo is a problem. So you got to break away from that if you want to think differently. Because you know what? We have this monkey see, monkey do behavior, the mirror neurons that gets activated. We just want to get into the agreement as fast as possible. But real creativity comes from thinking differently when we have differences in opinions. Because if everybody is thinking the same in this room, is anybody really thinking? It's only when you have different perspectives, different thought processes and opinions and perspectives are brought in, we can really look at thinking differently. Now, I want to give you a revelation. Thinking is agreeing with yourself. So if you want to think differently, it's disagreeing with yourself. I know this may go above your head. Let me explain that for you. Whenever we do actual thinking, we are actually conforming to the beliefs that we already have. There's something called confirmation bias, opinion bias. We are just agreeing to the things that we have already agreed upon. We are just reconfirming our beliefs. That's why when we want to hear a new information, if it is not corresponding to the information that we already have, we reject them. So most of our thinking we do, we are actually agreeing to our own viewpoint or opinion or perspective. And anything that opposes that idea, we reject them. Thinking differently is disagreeing with yourself. So if you can create disagreement with yourself, contradictions within yourself, challenging your own assumptions, and looking at different perspectives and viewpoints, you can think differently. And that is also, you can do that with groups by allowing different perspectives to come in so we can have better ideas and opinions. Because the tendency to interpret anything with the idea that we already have stops us from exploring. There is also knowledge boundary. That means what we already know can stop us from knowing what we don't know. There is also status quo bias, where people, there are people who still use the same soap the rest of their life. They don't change anything. There are people who have, experience fixation, I call it, that they stick with certain genre of music, movies, and the certain taste, and they never get to experiment anything. They never want to listen or experience anything different. They're all familiar with the familiar zone. So how do we do the disagreement? How can we do that? The first principle, I'm going to talk about 3 principles today, 3 points today, 3 ideas, how we can think differently. Number 1 is challenging your own assumptions. We live in a world full of assumptions. Even smart people, experienced people can go wrong with their assumptions. And the assumptions are about the beliefs that we have about what we have achieved. And most of our assumptions are formed with the experiences we have. We have certain experiences, and we form assumptions based on that, or certain knowledge that we have, we form assumptions around it. And none of these assumptions sometimes don't even go checked. But if you want to think differently, you've got to start questioning our own assumptions. And our own assumptions, basically, it will tell you what is possible, what is not possible by us. What is possible by us, it's an assumption. What is not possible by us, is an assumption that we make. The first thing is to understand our own assumptions and to challenge them. Challenge these assumptions. How do we do that? We ask questions like, what if? It's a scenario. What if it's a scenario? Why not? It's a scenario. What if we do that? Why not we think like that? And when we open up these questions, new questions leads to new answers. We can all be knowledgeable by the answers we give, but if we want to be wiser, we need to be smart with the questions we ask. And the questions that we ask changes the perceptions, changes the answers. And that's what we start thinking differently. Ask those questions that we had never asked before. And we start challenging assumptions. Edison had a habit, when he wanted to hire an assistant to work in his laboratory, he used to take them for having a cup of soup. And Edison will have a soup with one of the new candidates. And if the candidate puts salt in the soup without checking it, he won't hire him, because you know that this person is already having a lot of assumptions already built in that person. So you cannot work with such people, right? When you have too many assumptions already built in. So you need to have that free mind. The second thing that you could do if you want to really think outside the box, if you want to think differently, is to really tap into your own archetypes. Now, Walt Whitman famously said, do I contradict myself? Very well, then I contradict myself. I am large, I contain multitudes. There are so many archetypes in us. There's so many personalities in us. There is a philosopher in us. There is a warrior in us. There is a hero. There is a romance. There's a romantic person. There is the doer. There is the realist. So we are a collection of these archetypes. But if we can apply these archetypes differently while we explore ideas and options, we can do a better job at thinking. Now, one of the methods that has been used by Walt Disney is called the Disney method. So what he does, the first thing, he gets into the archetype of being a dreamer, comes out with all kinds of possibilities, all kinds of ideas, all kinds of fantasies and imaginations. It starts with imagination, right? If you want to really think creatively and see what is happening around the world, everything that we use today, all the gadgets, it's been part of imagination 20 years ago. If you have seen all the sci-fi movies, most of the gadgets that we use was part of the imagination. It existed as imagination. Today, it's a reality. That's why Einstein said imagination is more powerful than knowledge, because it starts there with the idea of a possibility first, starts with a dreamer. Then it moves to a realist. A realist is somebody who wants to see that if this imagination, these ideas, these concepts, or these fantasies, can it be turned into something practical? Can it be used into something that can actually create some value for people? So realist to see whether it's doable or not. But then you have the third archetype, which will come up and say, it's the critic. It will poke holes in the idea, and it says which idea is strong, which idea is weak. What is that we can do? So you can also do that with groups. When you work with teams, we talk a lot about diversity and perspective power. Ultimately means people bringing out different types of opinions. There will be realists, there will be a dreamer, there would be somebody who's a critic in the group. But if you can pull in these ideas together, we can also think differently as a group. That's why most of the countries where there are higher diversity in organization, those companies are doing well. Most of the cities where there are different cultures and different people from different diverse backgrounds are there, those cities are doing well. It's because diversity can translate into real creativity and real innovation wherever it is. So encourage more of that. So the most important person for you is not the person who agrees with you all the time. The most important person can be the person who doesn't agree with you. That's where we bring in the power of diversity and power of perspective power. Tap into the multitude within us in terms of creativity. The last and the most important thing that I want to leave you with, you got to be different. You got to be you. You got to be unique. You take any success today, whether it is an organization or an individual, what do you think is common between all these people? What do they have? Something in common. They had a uniqueness, but there is some major ingredient. I want to call it style. They all had their own unique style. Next. They had style. They had their own weirdness, their own gift, their own talent, or something that made them different from other people. They didn't sacrifice that uniqueness. In fact, they empowered it. So there is the things that people make fun of you, the weirdness in you, the craziness in you, the things that makes you a misfit, they are gifts. Those are the things that you can work on, nurture upon, and that becomes your unique style. And when you have your unique style, you are different than everybody else. And it is that uniqueness that you need to guard. You don't need to sacrifice your own uniqueness, your own weirdness, your own craziness. So the misfits are the new fits. The misfits are the new fits. And all you need is the courage to be disliked. There's a beautiful book, The Courage to be Disliked. It only talks about what is true inner freedom is. The true inner freedom is the courage to be disliked, to bring in your own weirdness. Because if you are not having that courage to be disliked, you are trying to please everybody. And when you are trying to please everybody, you are not pleasing the one thing that requires a self-expression, that is you. So have the courage to be disliked, have the courage to be a deviant. And I have experience in my life has always been deviating from the things that I've been doing before. And it's always moving towards the path of most resistant, to take the path of most resistant, to move towards things that you're more scared of and work on it. And we can all make a huge difference in our lives and other people's life. And thank you.